sewing channel. I'm Jill Haggerty and I am so happy that you're here today. Today is part 1 of Unpacking That Pattern with Jill. This is going to be a little bit of a different video than my past videos. I am so close to being done with all of my sewing preparatory videos for now, but I wanted to take this little break. I thought seeing and doing would be really beneficial for all the things that we've talked about up until now. So, let's get started. In this video, we are going to talk about Simplicity 1197 1960s vintage coat pattern. This is my most current project, kind of. I did last night, when I should have been working on this jacket, stop to finally sew up this shirt, which I finished. So fun, right? And this skirt as a matter of stress sewing. Does anybody else stress sew? What is your stress reliever? This is mine. I want to take you along to see exactly how I work together with this pattern to achieve the finished result that I'm looking for. I want you to feel like you can pick a pattern and do the same. If you have questions as we're going through, please leave them in the comment section below. I will answer. This is my goal, to help you learn how to sew, to help you gain the confidence to buy that pattern, make that shirt, finally have clothes that fit and make you feel really, really good. So, let's get after it. In part 1 of this series, we are covering how to prepare to start sewing your pattern. This is not really a sew along. This is more what you do when you get a pattern, what the steps are, and how you can break those down to make it feel easier and more fun. There are 4 main steps that I do to prepare to sew a pattern. 1, to look over the sewing direction guide sheet and get a main idea of what will be required of me as I begin this sewing process. 2, to cut out my pattern pieces. 3, to cut out my fabrics. 4, to cut out my interfacing, fuse it to my fabric, and get ready to sew. There are a few smaller ones that we will also cover, but these 4 main things, once I have done them, then I feel like I can get going. Something special to note. This video is very realistic. I am trying to take you on my journey so that you can see the ins and outs, the good and bad, of what it takes to get to the end of a sewing pattern. As such, not all the videos are super great. Some are taken late at night, which is usually when I find time to sew with a house of 4 children. Also, you will see me change my outfit multiple times. That is because I rarely can sit down and sew an entire garment in a day. I just don't have that kind of time. I take the time to sew in little increments that I find throughout the day. So, let's get started. At this point, I have gathered everything that I need, which would be fabric, interfacing, any notions that are included in my pattern. And remember, again, they are on the back of the envelope. With those steps done, I'm ready to look at my sewing guide sheet. Step 1, looking at the sewing guide sheet. I can use this guide sheet to see how to best lay out the pattern pieces on my fabric. That's really helpful if I have just enough fabric for my project. Other things that I like to see in this step 1 of getting ready to sew are the different kinds of things that I need to cut out. Here I will need to be cutting out coat fabric, lining fabric, and interfacing fabric. It's important to note that. I can look at the numbers on the pattern pieces that correspond with the actual pattern piece, as seen here, number 10, to know which pattern pieces need to be cut out of which fabric or interfacing. Also, before I get started, it is good to read through and see if there are any special instructions that I need to know before I get to cutting. Next, I'm going to cut out the pattern pieces for my pattern. In your pattern, you will have pieces on paper that looks like this. Pull it out and open it up. The pages with the pattern pieces are often very large. I will put this on the floor and cut out each of the pieces as instructed in my guide sheet. With all the pattern pieces cut out, I'm ready to move on to the next step. Today I am going to cut out my pattern. First tip when laying out your pattern is to make sure all your pattern pieces fit before cutting anything out. Tip number 2, don't pin too close to the edge of your pattern. That way you won't cut your pins with your scissors. The one other thing I wanted to point out about pinning, especially because I have had to teach kids how to pin in my sewing camps, is you pinch the fabric a little bit, go down and back up, down and up. On to cutting out the lining for my outerwear. As you can see, the grain line arrow is not consistent with the grain line of my fabric. So I'm going to unpin my pattern piece and move it in a way that will make it so it matches the grain line of the pattern. Always double check and make sure that your grain line arrows are consistent with the grain line of your fabric. This will make sure that your fabric moves and stretches with your body in the way that it needs to. Also, special to note, a pattern might call for an upside down pattern piece if you are cutting out two identical but opposite pattern pieces. It might also be appropriate to cut an upside down pattern piece if you are low on fabric, or perhaps the pattern or texture of the fabric calls for it. When using a slippery fabric such as this lining, it is a good idea to use more pins, pattern weights, or clips. With my fabrics cut out, we are now ready to move on to interfacing. I looked on my pattern guide sheet to see which pattern pieces would need to have interfacing. I will now cut out interfacing for each of these pieces. The nice thing about interfacing is that it isn't directional. I can cut out interfacing in whichever direction makes the most sense to get the longest mileage from my interfacing. Let's move on to applying your interfacing. This is a fusible interfacing. You apply it by getting it wet. One side feels smooth and one side feels bumpy. The part that you want to spray is the bumpy side. Interfacing is applied to the wrong side of the fabric. So as you look at your fabric, you need to see which side is the wrong side. Wrong side up. I spray both the top of the fabric and the side of the interfacing with the glue dots or the little bumps. I like to double check that I will be putting it on the side that I want. This will be the outside of the undercollar. I can go through and clip any extra interfacing that hangs over the side. If you flip it over to iron the reverse side and you have interfacing hanging off the edge of your fabric, you will get glue from the interfacing on the face of your iron. So don't do that. It's like cooking a steak, you guys. You want the sizzle. Dog owner problems. That's it. I hope you enjoyed part 1 of Unpacking That Pattern with Jill Haggerty. H. Jackson Brown Jr. said, "Life doesn't require that we be the best, only that we try our best." We don't have to be perfect at this. That's okay. Let's just do it. Thank you, Nike. Bye. See you for part 2 next time. Bye. Floor is so creaky.